Hello, I'm Saikiran, a cloud support engineer here at the AWS office in Hyderabad. Today, I'm going to show you how to add or modify endpoint settings for AWS Database Migration Service endpoints. Let's get started. Endpoint settings, formerly known as extra connection attributes, define additional endpoint specific settings to use for an AWS DMS task. For example, you can use endpoint settings to control the timeout, time zone, and the file size settings of a specific endpoint. There are three ways to add or modify endpoint settings: using the AWS DMS console, using the AWS command line interface, and using the AWS CloudFormation. Let's go through each method. Using AWS DMS console. To create a new endpoint with endpoint settings, complete the following steps. Open the AWS DMS console and then select your AWS region. In the navigation pane, expand Migrate or Replicate and choose Endpoints. If you are using old navigation, choose Endpoints. Choose Create Endpoint. Select the endpoint type and enter the configuration details. Give a label for your endpoint. ARN is optional, so you can keep it empty. Choose a source engine of your choice. For this demo, I'm selecting Amazon Relational Database for MySQL. Now, we must provide access to the database endpoint. I've already created an RDS MySQL instance, which you can see here. On the endpoint creation page, provide a server name and port where your database is running. Provide the username and password. Expand the endpoint settings section. Use a wizard or JSON editor to provide the setting name and value. Choose Add New Setting and provide settings as required. Optionally, you can choose Use Endpoint Connection Attributes and enter the settings in a semicolon separated list. Expand the Test Endpoint Connection section. Select your replication instance. Choose Run Test. If successful, choose Create Endpoint. AWS DMS will create the endpoint even if the connection test fails against the replication instance. To add an endpoint settings to an existing endpoint, select the endpoint to modify, choose Actions, and then select Modify. Expand the endpoint settings section. Use a wizard or JSON editor to provide the setting name and value. Choose Add New Setting and provide settings as required, or you can also provide the settings over the editor. Optionally, you can choose Use Endpoint Connection Attributes and enter the settings in the semicolon separated list. Now choose Save. After an endpoint is modified, AWS DMS will automatically test the connection against the replication instance. However, let's manually test it so that you can see the output. Select the endpoint again, choose Actions, and then select Test Connection. Select your replication instance and then choose Run Test. Now let's see how to perform this using AWS CLI. To run the AWS CLI command, you can use your own CLI setup or use AWS Cloud Shell. To create a new endpoint with custom settings, run this command. To test the connectivity, run the following command. After you choose connections, the endpoint screen shows testing and eventually shows success. To modify an existing endpoint, run this command. Verify the endpoint settings from the console. Now test the connectivity again. Run the following command. After you choose the connections, the endpoint screen shows as testing and eventually as success. Now let's see how to perform this using AWS CloudFormation. To create a new endpoint, complete the following steps. Open the CloudFormation console and then select the correct region. Choose Create Stack and then select with New Resources. Select either choose an existing template or build from Infrastructure Composer. For this lab, I'm selecting Build from Infrastructure Composer to show you the template design. Choose Create in Infrastructure Composer. Select Template. Enter the following template. Choose Create Template. Choose Confirm and then continue to CloudFormation. Choose Next. Enter a stack name of your choice and choose Next. Choose all defaults and then select Next. Review all the details and then choose Submit. Navigate to the AWS DMS console endpoints page and then refresh to see the newly created endpoint. Cross-check the endpoint settings section to verify the settings. To modify an existing endpoint, complete the following steps. Select the stack and then choose Update Stack. Select Make a Direct Update. From the options, I am selecting Edit in Infrastructure Composer for this demo. Choose Edit in Infrastructure Composer. Select Template and then make changes. Choose Update Template. Choose Confirm and then continue to CloudFormation. Select Next for the prompts. Review all the details and then choose Submit. Verify that the update has been completed. Navigate to the AWS DMS console endpoints page and then cross-check the endpoint settings section to verify the settings. And now you know how to add or modify endpoint settings for AWS DMS endpoints. Thanks for watching and happy cloud computing from all of us here at AWS.